Nikki. How are you?
I am chilling, man. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I have a question. Okay, and so like if this is wrong, like it's gonna sound weird, but are you the same Vanicky that messaged me 5 years ago?
Fuck, I am.
You
I didn't
are.
think you were.
That's
I am so
insane.
shocked. Oh my god.
Okay, dude, it's been 5 years, and now we made it. We made it happen.
Yeah, so the context for that is that I was a jobless 13-year-old, so I didn't have money. And I kept asking my mom and she's like, "Yeah, sure, son." And then she would all forget.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I have a job and I
Well,
can make my own sessions or
it's
you know.
crazy. It's crazy. Dude. I do remember. I do remember because I remember I reminded you a couple of times, and the reason I remember is because I usually don't remind people. Um,
Mhm.
but this is just like a sort of exception. I was like, well, I mean, this person really wants it, so like I'll just you know remind them before the opportunity is gone. But
Yeah.
yeah, so like good, awesome. We can finally sit down. Glad to meet you, like officially, I
Me
guess.
I've heard a lot about you because Lipton is my best friend and he's benefited a lot from your coaching. So
Very happy to hear that. I love working with Lipton. Very smart fella.
the guy's an intelligent dude.
Yeah, yeah. And I see you're rocking the Delta Rune avatar. Big fan.
Oh
Big fan.
yeah, I talked about it to you on Twitter actually.
Yeah, I remember. We had a
Did you
short
play
exchange.
four yet?
Sorry?
Did you play four yet or?
Yeah, I was playing 3 and 4 when they released. But I was almost not gonna play 4 because I thought 3 was kind of mid.
No, I understand. Four is definitely like a lot better. It might be the best chapter,
To
my
me,
humble opinion.
to me, it definitely is. I think they might be laying it on a little bit thick with the lore, but just like the visuals and the overall, like it's just peak. It's peak Toby. It's peak Toby.
It's it's Pete Toby. Okay, let's get into it before we ramble about other things.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. I mean, it's not gonna cut into coaching time. We're just gonna be
Ah, you're good.
doing
You're
the
good.
full hour either way. So, your text. Recently, I've realized that I'm not good at giving up stage without a purpose. Like Ouch gives up space to set up for combo starters or stuff approaches with set starters. Danny's super comfy with constantly giving up stage for information's sake, whereas I only ever give up stage to win close quarter combat or if I'm not comfortable in winning it. I also think that part of the reason I struggle with it is because I don't fully understand implicit threats, or at least understanding how my opponent responds to it. So I'd like to understand that more as well. It's really good reflection on what you're dealing with. Tell me a little bit about why you feel like this is like your core issue.
So I have been playing this game for quite a while, and I feel like I have a really strong fundamental understanding of it. But oddly enough, I feel like for as much as I know about Wolf as well, I don't really play him in the way how I think he should be played.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I kind of just sit down and I play my set. And when I don't have a game plan, usually the conclusion I end up coming to, like with my gameplay, is just like, oh, I'm just gonna win scrambles and they're gonna die every time. And if they don't, then I'm gonna lose.
Right.
And I play my worst when I think I'm playing like that. And it's ended up happening like a frustrating amount now that I've started finally playing against these high level players and like getting pretty far into brackets where like I'm trying really hard to play like versus my opponent, but I'm not playing Wolf, if you get what I mean.
Right. Yeah.
Because I think that he's a very strong mid ranger character, and of course he can win scrambles. Of course he can play that long range too. But the mid range is where like I find a lot of my value in a lot of these matchups, and I still don't have like a particularly like good methodology for playing that mid range, I suppose, or
Okay.
even making it.
Yeah. Good. Awesome. Great. And so today we're going to be doing a bit of VOD review. So do you have a VOD in which we can see this in action?
I actually have a perfect vote for this.
Okay. I love perfect VODs.
I also timestamped it
Okay,
in the.
perfect. Yeah. Oh, it's a Twitch VOD. I'm sorry, it's not a perfect VOD, but you know what? It will do. It will do.
It will do.
I'm just kidding. So, any context I need to know before we go into this game?
I kind of it's weird because I feel like I should know. I do know how it should go down versus Brawler in this matchup. But when I sit down and I play against him, I end up just over respecting some of his movement options, like his full hop. And yeah, I don't have anything in particular, I have to say. And then the audio is also cutting out for me. So if you see me like floundering a little bit, it's also because of that.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. Okay, let's just watch. So in terms of auto review, what I like to do is I just like to watch a game in its entirety. So let's just sit back and enjoy game number 1.
And I played Robin this game too.
It's not gonna be enjoyment. I got 3 stocks.
I mean, Osh 9 is a very solid player.
All right. Well,
Yeah, for sure.
Me Brawler matchup is a scrappy one. But truth be told,
Plus, I used to do a lot better against him like 1.5 years ago. But he started grinding a lot with Danny, and while I still don't think he plays the matchup like perfectly, his execution of his game plan versus Wolf is still very solid.
Yeah, and this is one of those characters where if the execution is very solid, you're prone to exploding at stupid percents.
Trust me.
Yep.
Feels like me Brawl. It just feels like me Brawl is like if Wolf had like a good offensive off B.
Did the commentator just say me Brawler is Wolf if he had a good offensive option? What the fuck?
A scrappy.
Dude, I just ignored the commentary for this tournament. It was kind of ass.
Feels like me Brawl. It just feels like me Brawl is like if Wolf had like a good offensive off B.
Oh, a good offensive obby. Okay, that's still a very weird thing to say, but okay.
Yeah, but what he makes of
They both have a lasting nair and a combo, and they have a back air that's strong, so they're the same character.
They're the same character,
They're
obviously.
the same character. Okay.
Projectile, even though I like shot put, gun.
Yeah. I mean, like, do you really want the Brawl archetype to have good projectiles when you?
Yeah.
No, it happens. It happens.
Alright, we're gonna stop this conversation as we go. Right now, Viniki kind of struggling to get something clean going against or after we, clean up the slop right now. But, Viniki,
I like what you're doing. I think if you played this way like maybe 3 years ago, you would be like, it would be seeing a lot more success. Like your playstyle is good. It's just a very like old meta type playstyle, and we'll talk about it in a second. Don't worry. But I like what you're doing a lot. You just did the hard things first, and now you have to do the easy things. So this is good. This is good.
Aside from gotcha,
you get more damage. It's really good at damage building because it's like 23%.
Yeah.
A little miss on the read. It's okay. Oh my gosh.
Okay.
If only he didn't grab ledge, would have killed.
You grab that.
Yeah, right now,
probably wouldn't have killed.
Again, we're kind of like in
Oh.
territory. Oh my god.
Oh, he's
Good DI.
amazing
Is
DI.
phenomenal.
Oh.
This is
Full hop double jump to center.
Oh, he grabbed
No.
Oh, I thought that was gonna kill him.
Don't let it be you.
Oh, he grabbed. I had a brother. Oh.
Yeah.
Can't be scared there for a second.
Oh,
Oh my god, just throw him way out there.
this guy's not.
I thought he was
Yeah, he's just not pressing kill options.
He really isn't. I usually just expect Osh to just start spamming back at this point, and he's just not. I'm like, okay, the fuck do I do now?
Wait, my one plan. Oh, that was a good sight. Bro, that move, I fucking hate. Grabs of super armor should literally just be like banned.
What a parry.
Dude, I play Strive Season 4, and they gave Potemkin super armor and Popbuster. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing.
I've heard every single Strive playing friend complain about that shit. I've played earlier versions of Strive, so I know how stupid Pot is. I've never played it against him in Strive. I can just in my mind, it's like the stupidest thing you can do as a developer.
It's so much worse than you think is the worst part. Because they removed all of his weaknesses too. He's supposed to have bad dash, bad at resetting pressure, prone to getting DP'd. And then let's give him super armor. Let's make Hammerfall cancelable way earlier. And let's give him a wild assault too. Yeah, because he needs that.
Okay, but the actual question is how good is he though?
He's number one. I'm not kidding.
He's actually the best character. Oh my god, I feel bad for you. So I assume you're not playing Strive until the new patch drops, right?
Oh no, I was hearing today.
Oh no, I mean you're doing it to yourself at that point, man.
Yeah, I really am. I'm the problem though. I play Naga.
No, but like, okay, so playing the Beyblade doesn't make it better, but it's not as bad. You know, like don't compare yourself to grapplers, okay?
Yeah. Of course. I have some self-respect.
There you go. Okay, so let's talk about kind of where we're going with Smash. So this is what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of tell you what I'm seeing. To explain what I'm seeing, I'm probably gonna have to explain a little bit of theory. So I'm gonna be doing a decent bit of talking. But as we're kind of like rounding out topics, we'll be pausing and I'll be giving you a little bit of time to just like, for us to talk a little bit about what we discussed, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
So what I'm seeing in your play is your play revolves around essentially countering approaches. This is most of what most of where your hits come from. So for example, you'll be positioning yourself at like a jump in nair distance, and then around the time when you feel like your opponent will commit to the jump in nair, you'll be dashing back, they whiff, and that's kind of like how you get your openings. What does that mean? Yeah. That means that like generally you're very reactive and you're oftentimes not in control. And let's talk about kind of like reactive versus active and being in control. Because the issue that I'm seeing here is it feels like you're kind of like blending problem-solving styles together. Because being reactive is not bad. But to understand what I mean when I talk about reactive, we first kind of have to define reactive. Because I think if we're talking about like reactive or proactive, like I know there's definitions for these, but I have my own kind of like definition. So let's talk about this. So we can think about when we act in a given situation as being on a spectrum. And so we can say there's very like proactive options or preemptive options, and there's very reactive options. And so it's not really like, oh, you're always reactive. You're always like on the far side of the spectrum. That's not the case.
Yeah.
But you do tend to operate somewhere around, let's say, here. And so that's not a bad thing, but we have to think like, when do we apply proactive decision making and when do we apply reactive decision making? And that's what I'm kind of talking about when I say, hey, it feels like you're blending problem solving styles together, because there are certain matchups in which you're almost always being more reactive, and there's certain matchups in which you're almost always more proactive, and we'll talk about that in a second. But it feels like you're kind of trying to do a little bit of both all the time, which to me feels like you're not being as specific as you could be, right? And so we'll talk about specificity in the future. So let's think about pros and cons. So if we're proactive, what we get here is we get a lot of time, right? So we have a lot of time. But the downside of being proactive is that we have very little information. If we're more reactive, we have very little time, but we have a lot of information. Now, my question to you is, if you put Wolf in a situation where he has a lot of information about what's going on, right? Like maybe you even see the jump in, you have an idea of where he's drifting, right? Like that's already like a lot of information that you can use to act on. Does Wolf have the frame data to capitalize on that information with very little time?
Absolutely not.
Okay, and that's what we're seeing a lot in these situations, and why I feel like execution is something that that you, I don't want to say like that you focus on, but like if we're talking about the match, like it's one of the first things you're mentioning, right? So like I'm thinking, okay, well there must be some reason why this is important, right? And so the reason why execution is a focus for you is because, well, if you want to act on this information with very little time, the only way you're able to do that is by executing like better than anyone in, like you have to become the Jesus Christ of Smash Brothers, essentially, right?
Yeah.
And if the opponent is clean enough, if their execution is good enough, then there comes a point at which you can execute as well as you would like, but it's still not going to be enough to beat an opponent who is, well, to be frank, just executing better. And that's not like a flaw on your end, right? Like, it's not because you're fucking up. It's just that this is a game, right? Like, Smash Ultimate is a game in which if you are taking the initiative, if you are proactive, and you do it in a way where you're executing very cleanly, then what the opponent can do on reaction is extremely limited. Really?
Yeah, because like the
go ahead. What were you saying?
Oh, I was gonna say because the buffer and like how strong general options just are in this game.
Perfect, exactly. And so like you do a short hop nair as Mii Brawler, good luck pressuring that whiff. Even though you knew it, even though you reacted perfectly to it, even though you were positioning perfectly, even if we assume all of that, you're still gonna have a hard time reacting. And if we are assuming all of that, let's highlight real quick. At that point, we're no longer reacting anymore either. Because if we are preemptively positioning in a way so that we can react to an option, that means that we have already soft committed on a read. Because like, if we position for a jump in nair, we're not positioning for a dash attack. And we're not positioning for a dash up down tilt. And so by committing to positioning to counter, for example, a jump in nair, we're already making a read. So like in that sense, we're not even being reactive much at all. And so there's this illusion of like reactive play in Ultimate where like, yes, it can succeed, but the way it succeeds is usually if you already have a proactive read that lets you kind of like position in a way to make reaction succeed. At least for Wolf. If you were playing like Aegis, you could play more like raw reaction because like Aegis framed it out, or like Sheik, right? Like these characters can play more raw reactive. But for Wolf, really, there is no reactive play. So that's like the first thing I want to convey to you. So there are 3 ways to play reactively. So one is to make a read preemptively or proactively to position yourself in a way that you can react. And so let's say you think he's gonna do a jump in nair, and so you dash back and you position yourself to kind of like, pressure him as he lands. So let me ask you, what would be a more proactive way to capitalize on that read? What do you think?
Maybe positioning under a platform specifically, so it'd be harder for a jump in.
Okay, so that's like still like we're positioning ourselves to react. So let's imagine we try to position ourselves in a way to kind of like proactively control the situation. What do you think would be an alternative to kind of like repositioning ourselves and trying to react?
Maybe trying to win an air dare?
There you go. Yeah, and so like Wolf has a really good way to proactively capitalize on ideas like this because his nair generally outranges most of the, let's say, more close quarter characters' nairs, right? So think about like Ryuken, Mii Brawler. Your nair generally just like punches right through. And if you think about characters like, let's say, a Sephiroth or, like a sword type character, oftentimes you have the airspeed and something like a Fair to counter their jump startup, and these options all have decent conversions. And so what you can the issue with this idea, right? Like the flaw here is that we are making a read and then relinquishing control to capitalize on it. And so we are hoping that they are not mixing it up. Now, here's the issue, and this is something that you've kind of already highlighted yourself, so now I'm going to throw your own wisdom back at you. You're playing against better and better opponents. And these better and better opponents are going to do more and more to mix up their options in such a way that even though you have a read, let's say you read that he does a jump in nair. Okay, but like now imagine it's Spargo. You read that he does a jump in backer. Congratulations. Now read which of the 5 million ways the jump air, like which of the 5 million ways he's gonna do the jump in back air. And so sometimes he'll do a jump in back air and do like full drift in. Sometimes he'll fast fall. Sometimes he will not. Sometimes he'll do an early back air. Sometimes it will be late. Sometimes you see what I mean? Like there's so many different ways that someone can do the same thing that even if you read that they're gonna do it, you're gonna have to read what they're gonna do, how they're gonna do it, and when they are gonna do it, and sometimes even what they're gonna do afterwards. And so like we're like 4 reads in just to get a single hit, whereas like what I'm suggesting is to just like run up and do a fucking rising aerial.
Yeah.
Does that not sound simpler?
It definitely does, yeah.
And so what we want to do is we want to constantly be as proactive as possible, and we'll talk about playing proactively later. But we're already kind of like talking about being in control here, right? And so when we're more reactive, we are generally not in control, and when we are more proactive, we are generally in control. And the difference here is, are we, right? So if we're thinking about control, the question is, are we exerting influence over the game state? And the answer is always yes, but the question really is how much, right? And so if we are positioning, retreating, then we are kind of by definition spending like exerting less control over the game state, because we are moving away from the opponent. We are giving them space to do whatever they want, and so in so many different ways, are we giving them room, and are we not exerting control over the game state? And so it's really important that you always focus on exerting as much control as possible over the game state, and we'll talk about that again more in depth in a bit. But let's first kind of finish the topic of playing reactively. So 3 ways to play reactively. First is to make a read proactively to position yourself in a way that can react. As we kind of discussed, this is a bad idea. Do you agree?
Yes.
Okay. So now there's a second way to play reactively. The second way that we can play reactively is by making essentially really hard reads. And so what's the difference here? The difference is if you reposition in a way that you can react, then what we're doing is we're essentially mitigating the risk that we're taking. And so this is what I said when I said, hey, if you did this like 3 years ago, it would be awesome. Because 3 years ago, the meta of the game really came down to, hey, how well can you mitigate risks? That's when Leia was at his prime. He would just like stay at roll distance and zone you the fuck out, right? Like
Yeah.
Exactly. No reversals, 0 reversals. And so like you're playing anti-reversal in a world where it's better to make sure you're not in a bad position in the first place. And so when I say you reposition yourself to react, right? Like that's very anti-reversal. You can also play more reactively by just making really hard reads. And so what do I mean by that? That this is more of an idea of, hey, I'm going to, for example, start a F smash charge on a jump read and then release on reaction.
Yeah, I do this a lot, actually.
Okay, so there you go. And so like this is also a way to play reactively, but now again, like we're making a shit ton of reads. And so like, but this one is actually like, this one is somewhat viable. Because we're actually getting reward for the extreme read that we are making. Does that mean that you can use it all the time? No, because like it requires an extreme read. But this is actually something you can react with, and like especially with Wolf, you can like charge a forward smash, and let's say they do something else, you can release it, and a lot of the times you might get pressured, but you're almost never actually getting punished because
it's not that bad.
There you go. And even on whiff, right? Like it's not that laggy. I'm not saying it's safe, but you know, I've seen worse forward smashes.
For sure.
So that's the second thing we can do to play reactively. So now we're actually entering the realm of like feasibility. The third thing we can do in terms of playing reactively is to say, hey, our reactions are not for the sake of hits, but for the sake of information. And now we're talking more about, for example, what Danny's doing. Which, you know, like if you want to know what he's doing, you're at the right address. So what we're essentially doing at this point is we're saying like, hey, I am going to play in a way that is mostly reactive, and through that, right? So we're not really preemptively positioning ourselves. We're just like staying outside of harm's way entirely. And through that, we are looking for commitments that are linear enough to then capitalize on in the future. And so this is something that like if you were to win this set, I don't know if you win this set against Osh, but let's say you win this set, I would say this is the reason why. Because if you look at Osh's approaches, yes, he executes very well. But do you think that he mixes up every single element of his approach game?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not, right? If he did, he would be, again, like Spargo level, which he's not. And so like he's good, but he's not Spargo level. And so against players like that, where there's just elements of their play that you know are abusable, right? And I'm actually saying like you know how. So in other words, you need to know more about how the opponent can approach than the opponent does. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
And so if you know more about how to approach than the opponent does, then you can know exactly in what ways they are not approaching. And if you know in what ways they are not approaching, then you can start calling them the fuck out. And you can say, oh, well, I mean, you're doing your jump in there. Maybe you're even mixing up like your fast fall. And maybe you're even mixing up your drift. But all of that still means you're in the air when you're moving forward. And so you're never actually mixing up your forward movement with feints or, you know, like threatening backwards movement. And so you can see at that point, all you really have to do is like jump up, rising there, and like bada bing, bada boom, you've won the fucking game because they're never mixing up the way they are moving forward. So
yeah, and even if they do, then that's important information and approach they want to do now.
Exactly.
So it's like a net game for the most part.
Yeah, but it's important to kind of like highlight this because like if they do play in a way where they mix up so well that we cannot really react to it, then we're no longer playing reactively, right? And so the purpose of reactions is often it's more so a gateway towards a proper proactive style than it is an end goal in and of itself. Okay?
Yeah.
Cool. And so in this case, reaction is a gateway to information that will let you play proactively. So this is probably the most powerful and at the top level play, the most common application of reaction. And I see this in your play to some degree, but I also feel like you get stuck in it. It feels like you're reacting for the sake of reacting. It's like, oh, I have to play anti-reversal. Oh, I have to, etc., etc. And I think if you work on that, it's going to do wonders for you. Okay?
Okay.
Any questions about what we discussed regarding reactive play?
So far, not particularly, but I do have a little like a little bit of context that you want to add.
Sure, please do.
Have you ever heard of Fusix by any chance?
Sheik player?
Sheik player from our region.
Yeah, I do.
He is phenomenal, like reaction time, and he's our number one at the moment. And you know, a lot of like regions usually kind of start surrounding that number one when it comes to right? Yeah. So you play to beat it, or you play into it. So a lot of our players either devolve into like zoners that like, you know, swing a lot like play really proactively, really preemptively, or a lot of people who just try to like outreact. So we have like a Greninja player who does, me of course. There's another player that comes to mind. Oh yeah, a Pichu named Meridia as well falls into that category.
Yeah, isn't it Raidea? I actually now I'm actually confused. Raidea. Okay, my bad.
No, you're good. But yeah, no, I feel like I just kind of fell into that mindset because of that. Yeah. I played a web and Matchbox the other day actually, and like I did solid, but it definitely did feel like web would just what you described, where he would only really use his reactions for this like sake of information gather, rather than to get openings the way that like Fusix does, and it was definitely like really jarring to experience that. And especially when I played against like Goblin a few years ago too, it felt similar to that because I got destroyed because it wasn't like the fast and sloppy style that I was expecting. It was more of like the slow and clean one, which I feel like I struggle against as a player.
Right, and so that's kind of like the crux of what we're talking about here, and so like the reason why the meta has shifted towards like more proactive play is because players have gotten good enough to play proactively and clean at the same time. And 3 years ago, we just weren't at that level yet. And so 3 years ago, people would either play slow and clean or fast and sloppy. And this is still the case for most players, right? But as you get better and better, you're going to find players who are faster and cleaner. And that's where it falls apart. And so that's where you have to be one step ahead of them and say, hey, like you can spend a lot of time like refining what you're currently doing, and you can get further than you currently are, right? So like if you're like, I want to play this style, like there's plenty to do in terms of developing this style, but you're gonna hit a wall, and I would know because like I've hit that wall myself, where I was at a point where I'm like, hey, I play the way that you play right here, and it just wasn't working out. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about it, researching it, and what I figured out is what I'm telling you right now. And so again, like if you want to play that way, I think there is like still a lot more to discover there. And there are players at like really high levels who play that way, who have success. So like Mutes would be an example. And Tweak is also way more reactive than the average player. But you got to keep in mind, these players compensate for these things in major ways, right? Like Tweak being probably the best, like probably has the best flowchart in the world, right? Outside of maybe some Japanese players. Mutes makes up for it with 0 to death combos, which last I checked, Wolf does not have.
Yeah. And they also have items too. Which is really more about that.
That's a huge part of it as well. And so like what I'm just trying to say is like it's not like what you're doing is not bad. Again, it's just outdated, and it's like time to shift gears. And the important thing here, and again something we'll talk about. This is, I know we have 30 minutes, but I'm sure we're gonna be able to cram it all in. But playing fast and clean is a whole different mindset, and we'll talk about that later. We're going to go through this step by step because I think I have to kind of build on the information that comes from the step beforehand, okay? So let's talk about control. So the first thing I want to do is kind of explain to you why control is desirable, because I think, you know, people are like, oh, you should be in control, but why, right? Like, has anyone ever explained to you what about being in control is good? And so I'm going to give you the TLDR. The TLDR is, if you want to win consistently, you have to control the game state. And so to kind of compare this, imagine you have to get to work because you have to make money to get coaching sessions and get to events. But every time you go to work, there's like a 50% chance that you get run over by a car. At that point, you have zero control over whether you're consistently going to make it to work or not. And so whether you make it to work or not is entirely outside of your control. And so you cannot get the outcome that you want consistently. It's the same for Smash. And so really the difference between being in control and not being in control comes down to, can I make my desired outcome repeatable? And if you can make it repeatable, then you're in control. And so if we are waiting for the opponent to act first and basing our options on their options, in other words, playing very reactively, then we are, by definition, not controlling the game state as much, because our answer relies mostly on what the opponent is doing. And that's the issue. And so control is all about how many variables in the game you exert influence over. And so this can be consistently hitting combos, right? So this, in this sense, like that's like positioning, percentages, etc., etc. But it can also just be movement, right? But actually, it's mostly movement, because if you think about it, Smash in essence, right? If you break it down to like the very, very like nitty gritty, it's just hitboxes and hurt boxes moving through space over time. Right? Yeah. And so the two most important variables in the equation are space and time. And movement is the way that you control space at the cost of time. Or if you decide that you want more time, then you have to pay for that by moving less. And so space-time, in other words, movement, really is the core of how you exert control. If we play very reactively, we are sacrificing our influence over space to get a lot of time. But what we've kind of discovered in the game is that time is not a very strong resource in and of itself. And what we discovered is that time really only functions when you convert it into something else. And so there are exceptions to this. So think about Steve, right? Steve can convert time into building a wall. Steve can convert time into mining. And so for Steve, right, like Steve players have shit movement. And partially because Steve is a slow character, but also partially because the character doesn't need movement because it has another way to translate time. But you're playing Wolf. You're playing Mr. Fundies. The only real thing that you can do with your time is translated into movement. And so when you move, or when you decide to stop moving to react, you are giving up the main way that you are exerting control over the current state. And that's something that has to stop. And so what you need to do, right, is you need to figure out how to optimally convert time into movement. And to do that, you need two things. Okay, and this is all very general, and I'll give you some concrete examples, but generally, one, you need a target destination at all times, preferably multiple. And so when I talk about multiple, essentially, right, like there will be an ideal situation, right? So let's say I play mid-range as Wolf. Okay. Ideally, I want to be at mid-range, but there will also be other like sub-situations or even secondary situations that are also fine. So let's say I want to be in mid-range and I want to be jumping, or I want to be at mid-range and I want to be on the ground. And so both of these are mid-range situations, but they're actually like different situations, because in one, you have pressure from the air, and the other, you have pressure from the ground. Or if you want to be more extreme, you can say, oh, I'm playing something like Young Link. I want to either be like up close and throwing out my frame data, or I want to be all the way back and using arrows. And so like, yeah, I would say like up close is probably better against Sephiroth, but if you're always trying to be up close, then your target destination becomes very linear and still. And so sometimes your target destination might even be just the position you started in, but the act of dashing in and out is going to threaten the opponent, and that's where we get again into like trying to gather information and going from there. So a target destination at all times, preferably multiple, and multiple routes to every destination. So what does that mean? That means like I can dash, I can short up, I can full hop, I can delay my jump, I can fast, so I can not fast, so I can mix up my drift, I can neutral, then drift out, I can drift out, then neutral, I can roll there, I can walk there, I can... You see what I mean? Like the more ways you have to get there, the more pressure you put on your opponent to make multiple reads, because let's say we have one destination, which is I want to be in the mid-range, okay?
Yeah.
But now say you have 5 different ways to get there. Suddenly, even if your opponent knows you want to get into the mid-range, good luck stopping you from getting there, because there are so many different ways for you to get there.
Yeah.
And so let's say he tries to catch the jump route. Okay, we were full hopping over that. Or he tries to wait for the roll route. Okay, we're just going to dash in there, and now you're waiting, and I'm in your face, you silly goose. And so the more routes you have and the more destinations you have, the more control you have. Because if you want to break it down, right? Control is how many variables you're exerting influence over. But one caveat of fighting games is that every interaction has counterplay. And so this is different to, for example, like a chess. So if we're thinking about chess, this would be the end of the advice. If you want to be good at chess, exert control over every single individual element of the game to the maximum degree at all times. And boom, you're a or you're a chess genius. But Smash is a little bit more complex because there's an RPS to it. And so part of control is adaptability. And so what does that mean? That means that, well, imagine you have one destination, and even if you have a shit ton of routes, let's say you fight against someone who knows exactly how to shut down that situation. Now you lose.
Yeah.
And so we need adaptability, because adaptability is what elevates a strong flowchart to a resistant flowchart. And being resistant is more important than having a strong one. And so right now, you're actually already pretty resistant. In other words, you're actually like doing a pretty solid job at adapting to your opponents. It's just that because your base flowchart, in other words, your game plan is so subpar, and I don't mean as in like it sucks ass, I more so mean as in like you've went the wrong route, right? Like you're focusing too much on... go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, it's like not really that efficient.
Exactly. It's a matter of efficiency. Perfect. Great way to put it. And so like you're already pretty resistant. And so in that sense, I feel like you're not the type of player to get like destroyed if you're not ready by the opponent. You probably put up a good fight, but you probably kind of like struggle to get like that actual win, right? So like you're the like game 5 versus the good player, but still lost type player. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so the difference between being game 5 but still lost and being game 5 and I won is the base flowchart that you're working with. And so Osh 9 is more like I have a really strong flowchart but very little resistance. You're more like I have a weak flowchart but high resistance. And the issue in this game is, and this is the case for most competitive games, it's just like in that type of clash, the strong flowchart wins, because resistance is not as strong in this game because of the, like you said, the input buffer, etc., etc. So how are we going to exert more control? Well, we're going to have a target destination at all times, multiple routes to every destination. And then, right, we combine these two and we say, okay, we want to proactively control. This means that we want to always be moving to a stronger situation. And if we're already in the strongest situation, we focus on capitalizing on it. And that can either be just like hitting, like, trying to just play RPS. But it can also be, I'm just going to use the situation to, again, gather information, right? Like using a strong situation to see how the opponent reacts is also a way to capitalize on it. But this is, in essence, what you have to get towards. And what you need to get into this is, first, is the mindset of playing faster. Second is the mindset of being proactive. And third is the information of, hey, what are my target destinations in all these situations? And how do I make it so that my routes are so diverse that even if my opponent knows where I want to go, they will still not know how. And that doesn't mean that you can brute force the same destination because you have multiple routes. It means that if your opponent reads you, you get a little bit of leeway. And so if you notice that they're trying to call out your movement and they're wrong, you can say, okay, well, I got away with it this time, but they're catching on. Let's try to shift what I'm doing a little bit.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense.
So let's talk about playing fast. Let me think. So this is hard because, like I said, playing fast. It's not just like the issue with playing fast is that people don't know how to do it. That's honestly the biggest kind of like hold up here, because and I say this because I suffered from this myself, right? Because you feel like playing faster is just a matter of doing the same thing but at a more rapid pace, right? But that's not the case. So playing faster, it's actually about, right? Like this is about adopting a new style of decision making. And so your current style, this is very like Uda. And your target style is reflexive. And so let me talk about these styles. So Uda stands for observe, orient, decide, act. This is a great style of decision making if you're working in a kind of like situation where high quality decisions are the end all be all.
Yeah.
And so like I would compare Smash more to like a boxing, where if you are taking the time to figure out what the ideal option is, you're gonna get hit in the face.
Yeah.
And so like a high quality choice is actually not our end all be all. Our end all be all is high enough quality, and what high enough is kind of abstract. And I could not tell you either. I think no one in the world could tell you. That's something that you're gonna have to figure out as you improve and play the game, of course. But the point is, this style, right? This trades speed for decision quality. This is still a good style to use if you're playing against more like reactive players. So if you're playing against Fusix, he's giving you the room to make really high quality decisions. Maybe go for it. If he makes higher quality decisions than you do, then of course it's something that you probably don't want to do, because he's going to beat you at your own game. Or in other words, he plays the game better. It's not your own game at that point. But you get what I mean. Uda is practically it's a crutch, right? It's a crutch for people, right, who cannot make high quality decisions fast. And actually, like, who are these people? Well, it's actually like everyone who hasn't practiced. And so this is the issue. You have never practiced, and I'm kind of inserting this, but I think it's a fair assumption. You have never practiced making high quality decisions at a fast speed. What has probably happened is that you've tried to make a high quality, like you've tried to play faster, and you notice, hey, when I play fast, I make really shitty decisions. And so you decided, you know what, if I make bad decisions when I play fast, I should probably slow it down a little. Is that fair?
Yeah, for sure. Okay,
and so like that's the issue. Because what happens in Uda, if you think about it very objectively, is you, like Uda says, like Uda takes your, let's say, initial response, right? So let's just kind of like think about this neurologically. You recognize the situation, your brain sends an electrical signal. That's like your initial response. It's like a reflex. It's automatic. It takes that response and questions it. And it says, oh, well, this was your response. Is that the best thing to do? And then it starts orienting. It's like, okay, well, what are my other options? And then it decides. And so if your initial response sucks ass, in other words, if you make bad decisions on pure reaction, then you're never going to figure out how to improve that because you're sidestepping the problem. It's like, imagine you have a leaking roof and your answer is, okay, I'll just go to my second house. And of course, like, now you're no longer struggling with the leaking roof because you went to your second fucking house. And so, like, that's what we're doing. We're saying, hey, our initial response sucks ass. And so, like, we're going to take a little bit of time to not, like, intentionally not listen to it.
Yeah.
That's kind of absurd, isn't it?
It is a little absurd, yeah.
And so what reflexive does is essentially, it's observe, act, reflect. And so it's a pun, by the way, reflexive, because we're both acting on reflex and we're focusing on reflecting. So, you know, double meaning, love that. But the idea behind reflexive is that we're taking our initial response and taking it at face value and acting on it. And so if that initial response sucks, that highlights what you want to work on for the future. And so the issue with Uda and why it caps so low, and what I mean by that is, like, if we compare it to like really high level play, why Uda just doesn't have the same kind of like peaks as reflexive play does, it's because for Uda, your cap is by making the perfect decision after orienting your options. So in other words, you think about all your options and you pick the perfect one. But the issue is that's actually not very hard to do. Most players at this point, if you give them enough time, will actually, like, I would know, I'm a coach. I show people situations all the time and I ask them, what would you do here? And they almost always give me the right answer. And I'm like, okay, you should coach yourself. But the issue is, how fast can you do it? And so by stepping the issue, you're never training your initial response. And so you can have the worst, you can see like a situation and your reaction can be, I'm really feeling like eating pizza right now. And you would never tackle that issue because after thinking that thought, your brain goes, okay, but let's orient on my best choice. Whereas, like, it would be way more effective to say, okay, well, maybe I should not be thinking about pizza when I see the situation. And if we're thinking about it from that perspective, now we see a situation and we actually go straight to the right idea. And so that's the difference, is that instead of kind of like bypassing our bad choices and kind of like replacing them with good ones, we're accepting that the choice sucks and fixing it. And what that means is that for a while, you're going to be playing at a lower level. But in the long term, your choices are going to slowly get closer to your ideal decision making. And of course, they're never going to be the same, right? Like, you're like, just purely by the nature of having less time to think, you're going to make worse quality decisions. But imagine this, right? And this is actually like a metric that is used when I analyze, or when Tony analyzes, for example. So imagine we have like a decision making speed. And so if we think about like the fastest players in the world, they're about like 105 decisions per minute, okay? So imagine that, right? We're going to put that in like a pink. So they're going to make a choice at like this kind of like cadence. And some of these choices suck fucking ass. Agree?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, here's you, right? And Uda, in my experience, kind of caps out at about 90. If you hit 90, you're a fucking genius. But if you're at 90, you're already fucked. So let's say for you, if I were to guess, you're more close to like 75, which is still like very decent. And so like, let's say you make better decisions than this like really high level player. Well, your first choice happens around here. So by the time you made your first choice, you've already gotten punched in the face.
Yeah.
And then your second choice happens here. Well, by the time you make your second choice, you got punched another 2 times. And so, like, that's the issue with these decisions. They can be as high quality as you want, but you get punched in the face before you can make them. And your solution to that, kind of like your I don't want to like, you know, be mean about it, but the way you've patched it up, because realistically that's what you've done. You've patched up the weakness. Is you take more distance, you take more space, so that you have that time, because again, right, like, time is space. And so if you're not busy moving, that gives you more time, and with that extra time, you can make better choices. And so you like to take distance from the opponent, and with that distance, You can figure out what the best answer is, what the solution is there. And so what you need to do is you need to stop trying to be reactive, because your reaction has led you to go all in on this OODA idea. And you instead need to just constantly proactively work towards a good situation for you. And if your opponent denies you that situation, you just got some really, really good information. Because if you think about it, if you split up your movement properly, right? So think about like, okay, instead of just like one jump, let's separate it into like the rising part and the landing part. And for the rising part, I can do like 10 different things. And for the landing part, I can do like 10 different things. If you think about it that way, can they really react to a jump?
No.
And if we do the same for forward movement, and we say, okay, we're not just going to dash in, dash attack. We're going to dash shield, dash in, dash out, dash in, jump out, dash in, jump in, dash in, roll in, dash in, tilt, dash in, rising. You see what I mean? And so, like, can they react to, like, what you do after just seeing you dash forward at that point?
Hello?
Hi?
Oh, I said yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All good. So that's the correct answer. And so at that point, right, what we've created is we've created a game plan where they cannot react to our movement. And so let's say they want to stop you from reaching your preferred situation. What are we forcing them to do? How do they stop you from creating your preferred situation?
Probably just sending up theirs before I can, so on my own, or playing in a specific way to deny like the highest quality tree of options, I suppose.
Yeah. And so can they do this on reaction?
No, that's proactive, preemptive.
And so now, exactly. And so if we are, in other words, if we are actively, continuously, proactively creating our good situations, we are forcing them to either come up with a situation that creates such a big problem for us that we have to adapt, in which case, fair enough, or start to preemptively, proactively, in other words, play around our good situation before they even know it's going to happen. In which case, all we have to do is do anything but create exactly that situation, and they're already wrong. Do you see what I mean?
I see what you mean.
Okay.
Just like apply the context to it rather than just like look at the options as the options, I suppose.
Exactly. Perfect. Yeah, you're catching on quickly. So, final thing here is the topic of specificity, and this is something that I just kind of want to talk to you about because I think this is very like low hanging fruit. You fix this real easy and you get a lot of reward. And so, like, I have this rule, right? And my rule is be as specific as your opponent is. That's all. And so what do I mean by that is if your opponent is very specific, in other words, they are going for a very specific situation, a very specific jump in, a very specific whatever, then you can be specific. And if you match that specificity, you're going to actually get a really high reward. Because the more specific you are, the higher your reward is. But if your opponent's doing a lot of different things, then you should not be specific. And so what I'm seeing in your play is that you tend to be specific when your opponent is not, and you tend to be generic when your opponent is specific. And so if you can try to match that a little bit more, it's really going to do wonders. And of course, as you get better at exerting your own game plan, it's going to be more a matter of, hey, do I have to adjust my specificity to my opponents, or can I kind of like pull them along with what I'm establishing here? And so start off by kind of like understanding that, hey, we want to either match if they have control, which, you know, like let's say you're playing like Wolf versus Roy, you can be as good as you want, but Roy is going to be in control of the neutral for most of that match. Or we want to force them to match us if we have control. And so let's say we figure out that there's like something very specific that they are not matching us in. Well, let's just create that specific situation over and over and over and over and over and over until we win. And if they stop us, that means that they're being very specific. And well, if they are that specific, now we can make a specific read and get a really high reward. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, you mean.
And so that, like, really this all comes from the idea of being proactive. And so if we can loop this all the way back around and talk about what you wrote here, where you said like, hey, it's hard for me to kind of like manage my stage control and to have clear goals for the way I use stage. You have your answer. Really, because stage control is, at the end of the day, right? Stage control is a factor in what positions are desirable. Sometimes stage control is at odds with kind of like the character preference. And sometimes it's overlapping, and sometimes it's complementary. And so it's your job to navigate all three of these. And so what do I mean by that? Well, let's say we're playing like Wolf versus like a Ryu or Ken, and we want to play mid-range because, like, you know, mid-range matchup. But if we're cornering the opponent and we play too much of a mid-range game, we're giving them a lot of room to do whatever they want. And so in that sense, we're cornering the opponent. Hey, the best kind of like stage control option here is to directly put some pressure on them because they cannot dodge it, right? Like they cannot move back. But the matchup calls to stay at mid-range. And so like now they're at odds, right? Character-wise, I want to be here. Stage control-wise, I want to be there. Sometimes it overlaps. Let's say we're playing against something like let's say something more like I don't know, like a Fox. A character where we just kind of want to scrap because if we play like a slower neutral, Fox is just going to run over us. The character wants to be up close. So if we corner Fox, now the character wants to be up close, and the stage control-wise, we want to be up close. It's overlapping. And sometimes it's complementary. And what that means is that, like, either we can play for stage control or we can play for character preference, and either way, it's, like, fine. And so complementary options would be, like, something like, oh, well, I can either play more around, like, a center stage, right? Like, stage control-wise, I just want to control the center. Or character-wise, I want to be more, like, on a platform and use, like, my runoff threats to make the opponent kind of like think twice about approaching. Okay, well, we can do either. And they're both like good choices. And if either of them, like, we can use one to kind of like make the other stronger. And so all three of these are constantly to some degree active, right? Like, it's not like they're all, I don't mean simultaneously, but like either of these three are always to some degree active. And the hardest thing is to navigate this and to say, hey, when am I focusing more on like this kind of like the character specific distance that I want to be in other words, like the distance between me and them, and when do I want to focus more on our positioning relative to the stage, and when can I combine the two? Because in the situations where you can combine the two, that's where you get the most like that's actually like honestly where you win most of your matchups. And so really what I would recommend is when you're thinking about like these good situations that you want to proactively create, think about situations where you're both playing towards your character strengths as well as to stage control dynamics. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Veniki, that just about brings us to the end of today's session. Do you have anything else you'd like to ask me or talk about before we round today's session up?
I'm scrolling up a little bit because there's a specific sentence I want to capitalize on.
Do you know under which topic it was?
Yes, this is perfect. So, I actually, you were right on the money when you were talking about how I focus more on like Buddha than anything else. Because recently I've been focusing on actually making game plans.
Okay.
Because before I kind of just try to, I try to like, how do I phrase this? I was kind of like I focused on those like quality situations, right? But I was still focused more on like the quantity of things.
Mm-hmm.
And it tended to make me really inconsistent, right? Because I'm trying to like run down people who can't be run down sometimes,
right?
Or just run people down in spots where it's just not worth it, right? So I decided to just sit down and start making game plans. I'm gonna send you one of the ones I've made recently, actually.
Cool.
And for this tournament specifically, I was practicing, making those game plans, and then implementing them. I did not have one for Brawler, so I was kind of playing this weird, so I was trying to figure it out on the fly, I guess.
Uh-huh.
So it was definitely it's definitely weird because it's still foreign to me in a sense where I can't do it like in my own brain. I have to have it written down and like force myself to abide by it because it doesn't still really click with me when it comes to like valuing things, right? Because to a degree, I kind of just sit down. I'm like, oh yeah, Wolf Fair strong. How do I fit Wolf Fair? And like Sometimes it really is that easy, but other times it's like, oh, you're just focusing too hard on like landing these specific moves. How do we actually get there? And that's kind of why I started making these game plans where now I can see like what I'm looking for, and by proxy, what my opponent is looking for because of
Good.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one thing I will add to this, because I think this is good. The biggest thing I would say is like make sure, right? Like start by creating a generic game plan. Don't worry too much about preparing for characters, because think about it this way, right? Like what are our good situations? So they're fourfold, right? And so the first is our character strengths, right? So like in a situation where we can use our strengths, we're in a good situation. Their character's weakness, our player strengths, and their player weaknesses. And so there are only two of these that are constant, as in they're the same in every single circumstance. And that's like 1 and 3. Our character strengths, our player strengths. And so you can look into like, how do I play against my opponent? But the more we do that, the more we're giving them control, because now like our plan revolves around stopping them. Fuck that shit. What we want to do is we want to actively create situations where we are strong, either because of, again, like one of our strengths or because of one of their weaknesses. And so if you make a game plan, focus on your character strengths and your player strengths, because again, like in every single match that you play, these are going to come up. Whereas the character and the player weaknesses, they're going to be different almost every single set. And of course, it's okay. Like, let's say you're like, I want to really beat, what's his name? Fuzzix, the Sheik. Then you can prepare, because you know like that's going to be repeatedly relevant for you, right? Like you're going to fight him like in many locals and many situations. And so in that sense, it's a very rewarding investment, right? These are very recurring good situations. But the ones that are the most recurring are our strengths as a for the character and the player. And so that's why I recommend that you make generic game plans, because they're going to be so universally applicable. Okay?
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great.
Awesome. Let's see. Let's round up today's session. So first off, I have the notes for you. So I'm just going to send them here. You can do with them whatever you'd like. I also have a VOD of our session, which I'll be sending later tonight. If you have any questions about what we talked about today, so let's say, you know, even tonight or tomorrow or next week or next month or even next year, probably not in 10 years, but who knows? If you have any questions and you would like some clarification, send me a DM and I'm willing to clarify anything that we discussed today. If you do want to discuss new topics, I do recommend getting a new session. Okay?
Okay. I mean, yeah, this was good. I definitely am going to try it again sometime.
For sure. Take your time implementing this, right? Like if I don't see you for another year, like that, you couldn't make me happier. Final thing, I have sent you a link to my Discord. We have like 1,000 members. If you want, you can join. If you join, I'll give you the student role. This grants you access to the student channel, which is a place where I discuss the game with my students. It's a nice place to be. If you want to make use of it, feel free. I will give you the role when I send you the VOD, so be sure to join within like 30 minutes, and then you'll have the role afterwards, okay?
Yeah.
All right. Well, best of luck implementing everything. Thank you so much for your support, and let me know if I can do anything for you in the future, okay?
Thanks. I appreciate all the advice you gave me. I'm going to work on this as soon as I can.
All right. I believe, man. And yeah, again, best of luck, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.